Hello, this is Denise Gallant, and you are watching In the Loop, Art and Technology. And you just heard an engrossing performance by Bill Walker and Tim Thompson, who is doing a live interactive art piece. I guess that's the best way I can call it, because it's art and visuals and music. So let's start with Bill. So Bill, what are you doing here? There's so much technology to create what you do.
As I'm playing, I'm recording myself. And each time I record myself, it's actually a loop that I record. So it's a defined cycle that keeps repeating. And then so I can go on and I can record and layer other loops upon that and do some very sophisticated things while I'm playing as a way to just kind of, as an extension of my playing, so that I can create a bigger sound just from my own device here.
Well, in 1978, I interviewed Robert Fripp and actually videoed him on NBC, you know, from the TV set, doing loops with tapes. So how is what you're doing different than the older technology?
Well, it certainly offers a lot more options now, but it's essentially the same. You create a tape loop, and in his case he was using, I think, a pair of Revox tape recorders with an actual physical tape loop running between them to create that. The first time I actually physically saw somebody doing something like that was a guy named Paul Drescher, more of a experimental guitarist, and he was doing the same kind of thing. My first personal experience with any kind of looping was using two tape recorders in a friend's living room in about 1974. And at that time, there were no devices like what I'm using on the market right here. I'm using a digital loop recorder, and these started appearing about 1995. I had one of the first ones that was out, made by Lexicon, called the Jam Man. So since that time, this kind of technology has just continued to evolve, as you would imagine. But it really has its roots back in guys like Robert Fripp, or even before him, experimental musicians were using these kinds of techniques, guys like Terry Riley. And even some of the techniques I'm using today harken all the way back to Les Paul. And though he wasn't physically looping in that he wasn't recording a tape loop, he was recalling pre-records in his performance when he was playing with Mary Ford. And he was also really the pioneer of multi-track, which is really what this is an extension of. And he was doing things like I use today where, for instance, recording at a track speed, say half the speed I'm going to play that track back at, and then when I play it back, it's an octave higher and twice as fast. And I'm able to create a lot of my beatbox stuff, or gitbox, if you will, using that type of technique. And he used that on How High the Moon back in the late 50s. So it's been around a while. It just continues to evolve. I'm still using hardware processors, but this has all moved on to the domain of computers and laptops as well. And in that case, boy, the possibilities are really infinite.
But you don't use that yet at this
time?
Not
yet. I'm really comfortable with hardware. I happen to be very fortunate that I know and have worked with my friend Bob Almstead, who designed the product I use called the Looperlative. And so my piece of gear actually does quite sophisticated things. I can record up to 8 tracks independently. I can have those tracks playing back forward and reverse. I can do all kinds of things to them. I can stack them end to end so I can create ABC song forms.
So it really is a whole instrument in itself.
It is, and for me, it's been kind of it's been a way to develop my playing on this particular instrument, the lap steel. Where, to be honest with you, the lap steel is not the kind of instrument that, unless you're playing in a country band or a swing band, you're getting calls to necessarily play the lap steel. So I kind of had to invent my own music, and the looping has really helped in that respect, in that it just gives me this little one-man band to play with.
Do you have a concept in your mind when you start, or does it just, as you play with the equipment, sounds come out and then you just start playing with those sounds?
Well, that's a great question. I do both things. I'll have fairly composed pieces where I'll have maybe a series of strategies that I use throughout the piece and how I'm going to record tracks and such. And then the other thing is completely improvisational, where there still might be parameters in the case of what instrument I'm playing or how I might evolve it, though it's coming from an improvisational standpoint. And I certainly allow an openness for chance and happy accidents, because sometimes they render the real spark kind of creative things. And so it's primarily improvisational, but sometimes it's improvisational on themes and such.
Okay.
And sometimes it's just playing with certain strategies or playing around with extended techniques.
Like?
Well, for instance, I like to use a function called quantize replace. Now this is getting a little into geek speak, but if I can sum it up. If you record a loop, quantize replace allows you to just replace a predetermined fraction of that loop. Okay, so what it means is that I can do something like, for instance, I've done here, I've created a blank loop with no information on it at all. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to play a few notes, and each time I do, I'm going to press a button, and it's going to capture just, in this case, a 16th note subdivision of that entire length. And the length itself, the loop length, is very, very short, probably only maybe half a second long or even less than that. But so here it goes. And on from there. So every time I was pressing my little button, whatever note I was playing, it would capture that, but only whatever the duration I proposed to begin with, or I set up in the.
And the loop was a predetermined length.
It was a predetermined length. Yeah, I'd actually. I do a fair amount of pre-prep sometimes before I loop. Is I actually go ahead and arm several tracks so they're already actually at a certain length. And then I just start playing on top of them, like this one here. And oftentimes I'll use a delay to kind of give me a sense of tempo if I don't know what the tempo of that loop is. Because that delay I have is actually being clocked from the looper. In other words, it's reading a MIDI time clock and telling me how long the length of the loop is. So let's see what that means. So if I start to record some of this little beatboxing thing, it should be. That was the length of the loop there that I created. And all the other loops that I pre-armed are the same length, so I could do that quantize replace on any track I'm actually using. I was talking about using track speed, recording at a different track speed and bringing that loop back in at another track speed. So here I'm going to create a loop, and I'm going to start recording it, kind of my shaker part, if you will. Now you notice it's twice as fast as it was, and actually an octave higher. Let me do that again with a little more treble. my little groovy groove there.
Wow.
Basically all just kind of created out of, you know, various hand slaps, but then also manipulating the track in various ways with track speed and such.
So just
That's
off.
a little out there, I know.
No, it's
but,
beautiful. I love it.
yeah.
I mean, I could just sit here and listen to this all day. I love this kind of stuff. Yeah, Robert Fripp was one of my favorites.
Well, yeah, I know. I mean, he was very influential for me, too, in just the whole concept of soundscapes. And,
Yeah.
you know, creating an atmosphere, creating an atmosphere with music, that's as important in some ways as the song or the lyric or whatever. In my case, it's totally important because I don't sing, so, you know.
Actually, off-the-wall question here is, what kind of formal training did you have?
Well,
any?
I've been to music school. Oops.
Hello.
Let's see. I started playing guitar when I was about 12. My first lessons, I didn't quite get it, and it took a little while and a few friends and my brother to kind of get me over the hump with certain physical aspects of the playing. And then I went to University of California and started studying music there. And then from there I went out to Berklee College in Boston. And I didn't last very long there, I must say, but I enjoyed some of the aspects of the environment. And then I came back and I went to Cabrillo for a while, studied with Ray Brown, like everybody does. One of the best teachers in the world right here in Santa Cruz, Ray Brown, for music. And so, and then from there on out, it was just, you know, playing professionally. I've been teaching since I was in my early 20s. And I still do.
And you also went on tour a lot.
Well, no, I wouldn't. Well, that's all a matter of degree. But yeah, I've been a few places. In recent years, the last actually time I went to Europe was in 2008. I did a clinic tour of Switzerland, and a few gigs in Switzerland and Germany, and then I actually went to Istanbul to record for a week with a friend of mine who's been my music partner on many levels for about the last 2.5 years. We've been collaborating on a lot of stuff that we're trying to get film work with. His name is Erdem Hevesioglu, and he
what nationality? I mean, are you influenced by other kinds of music?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I've done the kind of the rock and the new wave thing, but I got very seriously into African music, and just kind of recently found out that the roots of my clan, the Walker clan in Scotland, there's a whole group of songs called Walker songs, and it's not Walker in the sense of walking. It's walking in that sense was a way of treating tweed.
Okay.
And thrashing tweed until it became more impervious to wind. And so the Walkers were the people who did that, and they had this whole group of songs that they sang. And what's interesting about it is the meters and stuff are very African-like, like the tunes are African-like, and the words apparently are completely nonsensical. So.
So it's basically somewhere in your bloodline. You feel
Must
that.
be, because, you know, I played
The
African
beats.
music for a long time. I did a little bit of a stint with Babatunde Olatunji, played with members of the Hedgezola Sound when Dow Rhythmical was playing. I was in a world beat band for a number of years in the 90s called Worlds Collide. So yeah, my influences are really global. You know, I'm just a white kid from suburban San Jose, but I dig music from all over the world. You know, and so I think it comes out to a certain degree in play.
I still like. I mean, the main thrust of your music is those soundscapes, which actually are very visual. So that's interesting. You're looking for film work.
Yeah.
It's like it's very visual. By the way, you have all these guitars here. Why would you choose this one, and what do the others do?
Well, this is an acoustic Hawaiian guitar that's based on an early design, a Weisenborn, made by Herman Weisenborn in the 20s. This is made by a dear friend of mine, Bill Harden, at Bear Creek Guitars. It's a little bit of a modern spin on this, and it's just a fantastic sounding guitar. It's a hollow neck guitar, and it's made out of coal wood. I've got my little buggy bumpers on the back there so it doesn't slide off, but it's a phenomenal sounding guitar. Very, to me, just a real singing vocal kind of quality. This instrument back here is also a lap steel, also custom made. This one has a lot of significance to me, emotional and sentimental. I have a dear friend, Japanese musician named Hideki Nakanishi, also known as Mando Man, and he's a great guitar builder too. And when he was out last year for the Y2K Loop Festival, I asked him if he'd build me an instrument, and this is what he built. It's just spectacular instrument made out of Japanese ash and Canadian maple, ebony from Africa, blackwood, and then a mutual friend of ours, another musician over there who's also an amazing wood carver, carved this relief here. And the instrument was started before the quake and finished about a month and a half after the tsunami and quake.
Ooh.
And I asked our other mutual friend, Ryusi Hattor, to pick the goddess or god that he wanted to put on the headstock because that's his sideline gig, religious relief carving.
Okay.
Yeah. And he picked Kannon, which is the Buddhist goddess of mercy, which I thought was pretty fitting considering everything. And another interesting aspect of this instrument is this has a German-made bridge that another friend of mine in Germany practically had to smuggle out for me. And what it is, it allows me to have individual string bending. It's pretty neat. It's like, as long as I've been playing lap steel, there's always been in the back of my mind, I'd love to have a pedal steel, but they're really pretty, big and complicated instruments, and they have all these levers, and as you can see, I'm doing a bit of multitasking with my foot as it is. So this is kind of like a pocket pedal steel that allows me to do individual bends or dual bends. And then the other two are your basic Telecaster and Stratocaster, electric guitars like I play, in which most of my work is on standard electric guitar, not on lap steel. But lap steel is kind of my driving passion right now, is playing it.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you were doing work with Moog also.
Well, I did. I got invited when I was out at the every January. There's the NAMM show, as you well know, which is the big music trade show down in Anaheim. And I got introduced to their A&R guy, and I happened to be going out to Asheville to visit in-laws, and he asked me if I'd come by and shoot some video with them on their new instrument. That's also a lap steel. It's a lap steel with some really interesting, unique features, and one of them being kind of the ability to create totally infinite sustain. Not kind of, the ability to create totally infinite sustain. So the ability to take a note. Now this has beautiful sustain anyway, but I could just let that note go forever. And I was hoping to have it for this particular thing, but they had loaned it to me for a while to take part in a roundtable review for Guitar Player magazine. And I finally had to give it back to them.
Oh, but you have these beautiful things
Yeah,
too.
and like, for instance, this is the instrument I'm playing probably the most right now because I'm exploring the whole bender thing, and it's just given me a lot of pleasure to play it.
And do you usually play alone, or do you play with other people?
I play in a variety of different situations. I do solo work. I also do a fair amount of backing up local singer-songwriters and such. Just finished a record with Dream Beach and Pipa Pignon and Daniel Lewis's band. I've done a couple of ballets in the last few years with my wife, who's a great singer and songwriter, Nancy Levan. We used to be in a band called Dresden together, and we're threatening to come out and start, you know, playing some new shows and such. So hopefully that'll happen in the new year.
They came so far to find the river, sun-drenched and dry as a bone. They came so far to find the river in secret catacombs.
And I play in a kind of a cover band called the IPOs, and a really talented bunch of people from Monterey, Salinas here in Santa Cruz.
And then tonight you're playing with Tim Thomas.
And tonight I'm jamming with Tim, my
Yeah.
good man Tim.
So Tim, come on over. So Tim, you were playing earlier, and tell us about what this is. It's called the Space Palette.
Space Palette. It's originally intended as an installation for events like Burning Man, for people to play with. I think of it as a casual instrument. It's definitely an instrument, but it's in this configuration. It's designed for non-musicians to come up and to be able to play and feel musical, and be able to control the music and understand that they're controlling it, but produce musical results. So I created it for Burning Man, but I also use it in performances. And
So the layout of it, tell us a little bit about the layout. Why do you have the big sections and the small sections? And
should I demonstrate
sure, yeah,
it?
go ahead, give us a demo.
It's based on the Microsoft Kinect, which is a 3D camera. So this camera that is over there is seeing my hands, but it knows how far away they are. So it tells my software as soon as it crosses this threshold, then my software does something with it and causes it to generate music. It also generates graphics that normally get projected. So each of these big holes is a separate instrument. So here's the bass, here's the drums, some bells. And the little holes are like buttons that I can use to change things or control things. So I can change the sound. And so across one of these big holes, it's about 2 octaves of musical notes across each of these. And if I'm up toward the top of the hole, the notes are fast. If I'm down toward the bottom of the hole,
Wow.
so you get control over the timing and the pitches.
And are there little directions all over there that you can see?
Well, no, one of the goals of a casual instrument is that you don't need directions
Oh,
to
okay.
play with it. People don't need directions to finger paint, as an example. And so this is the equivalent of finger painting in music. I can also turn on looping, so now everything I do is going to be looped.
And the looping cycle.
Say again?
And the looping cycle, is that controlled by something?
There's a fixed loop length.
Oh, okay.
It's about 16 beats.
And where do the sounds come from?
They're soft synthesizers on computers. They're very popular. I mean, keyboards nowadays are just computers inside, you know, a musical keyboard. So on a laptop, you can buy software synthesizers that make whatever sounds you want.
Okay. Do you create any sounds yourself?
I tweak them a lot. I mean, a lot of the making something like this sound good is tweaking the sounds to mesh with each other and with the type of music you want to generate. And also tweaking the response to, in this case, depth. The further in I go there, it adds vibrato.
Ah, okay.
And it also affects the size of the graphics that get generated. You can also think of these big holes as big mouse pads. So I've got 4 3-dimensional mouse pads. And so the graphics are essentially you're drawing with your hands in 3 dimensions.
Okay, and then how about the graphics? Where did they come from?
They're written in a programming language called processing, which is a Java-based programming language. A lot of people use processing for artistic things.
Okay, so what do you do for a living?
Well, I write software.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
I mean, do you do fun, for a living? Do you do fun software, or is this just your own thing that you do?
This
on
is
your
my own thing. I found developing music stuff to be good for learning about different technologies. In a software job, you're usually focused on one particular type of software, and you can't really branch out so freely. So having a side hobby that's software-based lets me explore a lot of different things that I can't do in a normal job.
What got you into that, to do that?
Well, I was a musician as a kid, and so when MIDI came out, it was like, I was also into computers as a kid, and this was back when, you know, computers used punch cards and things like that. So when MIDI came out in the mid-1980s, it suddenly, you know, the two worlds that I loved, music and computers, suddenly came together, and you could now merge them. And so being able to write software and being a musician is a pretty useful combination these days.
So other than performance, I mean, do you have any other uses for this?
Well, as I said, the primary goal of this particular thing is a casual instrument for non-musicians, or events like Burning Man. So as our previous show talked about, I create different installations for Burning Man. So that's one of my primary target audiences.
Oh, okay. And all the other creative people in Santa Cruz that like to play with your equipment?
Yeah, there's street fairs. 01, they have a biannual festival in San Jose. So there's growing, and in the Bay Area, in Silicon Valley, there's quite a few different events and people into technology-based art. So.
See, if I may interject, I used to work with disabled children through the County Office of Education, and had experience with kids of all kinds, aphasia kids, you know, just quite a few different types of kids in that respect. And to me, an instrument like this is potentially a really fantastic therapy tool, not just for handicapped children, but maybe learning disability people,
Parkinson's patients.
Parkinson's, Alzheimer's patients, any kind of thing, because it's not only this kind of interactive thing that really, even though there's set parameters that you've already put in there, there's a lot of freedom to improvise, to get into that kind of meat of what being a musician is.
And that's the goal. I mean, as a musician, we know what it's like to be in the zone when you're improvising and you enter that magical state. And the goal of this is to give other people the ability to get into that kind of state without spending years and years practicing.
Right.
So that.
Making music a little bit less elitist, if you will.
Yeah, reducing the learning threshold. I mean, a violin is very difficult to learn how to do mechanically.
Yeah.
And that's just a side effect of the way it was constructed. That's not a good thing. Instruments, we should be able to create instruments that are easier to learn, that you still let you have the same amount of creativity, or perhaps even less structured creativity. Your hands are incredibly expressive, just moving. So new instruments should be able to be easier to learn, more expressive, and we now have sensors are becoming ubiquitous, and sensors like this 3D camera allow you a whole bunch of new input mechanisms.
I think it's fascinating how you have it programmed that to just stand there and trying to find the secrets of the instrument. It's like, just as you said, it's faster here, it's slower here. As you go in further, there's
well, those things you learn, but you don't need to know them up front. Like finger painting, you could learn various techniques, but you don't need that to get started. So here, the fact that the timing is different at the top and bottom actually turns out to be a feature. If people just come up and wave their hands, they're getting a lot of pitch variation and also a lot of rhythmic variation just by the natural movement of their hands. Once they learn that the top is faster and the bottom is slower, they can use that to make better music. But there's lots of interesting user interface aspects to this kind of thing.
So if you had 4 hands, it makes 4 sounds?
Any number of hands or objects.
Can I be
a
guinea pig?
In fact, at Burning Man and other festivals, there's usually like 3 people side by side, all doing it simultaneously.
Here we have another live performance, another live dual performance.
Only the big ones make sounds. Only the big holes make sounds.
Oh.
But you must have done something.
It's motion that triggers the sound. So.
Oh, okay. So I can't just sit there and like Frankenstein, and it'll stop.
Okay.
Yeah, if you're, there's thresholds for those kind of things.
Cool. Yeah. Yeah, it gets kind of unmusical pretty quickly. but it's fun.
Well, all the notes are forced onto particular scales. So
Yeah, I was wondering
it's
about
actually
that.
hard to be non-musical with this
Yeah.
thing.
Okay.
Yeah, I had to work hard at being non-musical there.
But it was interesting just that you're a musician, the things you're doing with it, you know, I guess as opposed to somebody that isn't a
Well,
musician.
It's fascinating watching people walk up because every person does a different thing. Some people are very timid. Other people, the instant they realize what it's doing, they'll just go nuts. Some people go like this. Other people go side to side. You know, there's certain things that it tends to like.
I'm imagining a giant one of these with a bunch of dancers behind it,
Yeah.
all like kind of
Right.
I usually do different things every year for Burning Man and other things, but this has turned out particularly well. So this year I'm continuing to explore uses of it, and I'll be getting into full body, you know, instruments.
Huh.
See where
Cool.
that takes me.
Okay. So how is it for you two to play together? I mean, being that you're on your space palette and you're doing your looping, and does that bring out different things?
With the way they're currently set up, there's currently no synchronization between the two. So the best way to work together currently is to have one of them do the rhythm and then the other one to fill in. Since I have less control over things with this, it's usually easier for me to do the rhythm and for Bill
and me to play to him, yeah.
Okay.
But with the technology, it's possible for one computer to send its clock signal to another one, and so we could actually synchronize what we're doing.
Yeah, we could have done that if we had thought about it in advance and written a little bit, you'd written another little bit of code into
Right.
there.
I mean, the more things you
Right.
tie together.
As if you have nothing
the
else to
more
do,
problem.
right? You don't work or
yeah,
anything.
it's like he doesn't have a regular job or something.
Right.
Write a little more code, Tim.
So do you find anything, all of Bill's soft pedals and all of his hardware, that would be useful for controlling what you do then?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the looping that I'm doing on this is very much modeled after the kind of looping that the looping pedals do. And a lot of the algorithmic things I do within the loops is often inspired by things in the hardware loopers. So there's definitely a lot of crossover between the two.
And then I guess your sound could come into here too, and then you could pick off your little 1/16 of the sounds.
Well, yeah, there's always that kind of capability, and I do that sometimes. Like, for instance, when I play with, I've done gigs with my brother Rick at times where I was just doing captures of him. He was feeding a signal to me, and then I was doing captures and manipulating it in real time while he was playing. You know, throwing it back at him maybe at half speed or in reverse or chopping it up, you know, whatever, quantizing it like you say. Any of that kind of stuff is possible and interactive. It just requires more routing.
Okay. Actually, I do have some video of the two of you performing at Sayaka's Tsunami Relief Show.
Oh, yeah.
And he was playing, I think, a jug. So
Yeah,
were
he
you
was
doing
playing
something
a
with that?
guitar. I wasn't capturing him at that point, but that would be a situation where I could. He was looping himself too, but I could certainly, you know, depending on how, like I say, how his signal is routed into my rig, I could certainly capture that.
How many musicians usually play together? I mean, the two of you play with some other people. Is there lots of musicians that could be looping together and doing different things?
It really is all based on how you're applying it. Like, I'll use looping in a live band situation where I'm not synced to the drummer or anything, but I use it in a different way. Like, I'll play, you know, maybe I'll play a bit of solo or something, and then I'll flip it over and bring it back and then play against it. And those things are not necessarily specific on being clocked to the overall tempo. So I might use it in that way. Or we might really sync and lock our clocks up so that everything can be synced like that. When I play with Rick, Rick and I will probably have some clocking going on there that we can do that. When we played in San Jose at the Y2K, he was at least clocked to me. We didn't have both of us clocked, but I could send him tempo pulses, and his looper would line up with mine. And I don't know,
Line up a trigger to yours?
well, I just mean that I'm sending him a clock sync pulse, and that is reflected in beats per minute. It's a tempo, and so that's an electronic pulse that's basically allowing his machine to sync up and lock in with mine, so they don't drift from
Right.
one another.
Okay.
Sensibly, you could have a lot of different musicians playing, doing this kind of thing. And I know I've seen as many as 5 or 6 people doing it where they were all synced up, and that's really the key. Because otherwise it sounds like, you know,
It could sound
a
like...
cluster pluck.
Or it sounds like a
drum
space
circle.
palette.
Like a drum circle gone wild. Drum circle's gone wild, yeah. No, it just... The thing is like when I play with Rick, Rick's a multi-instrumentalist. I play a lot of different instruments. We can sound like a bigger band than we are, just as a duo. Oftentimes for me, improvisation, if you're doing it in a very intimate situation with just one other person, like Tim I was doing, or 2 other people, it just works better oftentimes than big group improvisation. Because big group improvisation really requires a lot of listening. And if people aren't listening, it doesn't sound that good, you know?
And also, I'm sure different styles are hard to
That
keep
too,
on.
you have to be on the same page on a number of ways.
Yeah.
Now for me, playing along with him, I love electronica kind of music and stuff, so it's no stretch for me to sit there and play along to it. And
It's interesting, one of the differences in musicians and non-musicians when they play the space palette is the musicians tend to be more selective about what they're playing.
Right.
Non-musicians will just keep waving their hands. So the ability to listen and selectively and not play is actually key to being a musician.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I kind of noticed, as you were doing it, you're definitely selecting things.
Yeah, and the thing is, that's the first time I've really kind of
Right, that
played.
is
That was my first time,
really?
and so part of that was just the natural tentativeness that I just don't want to bowl my way into this thing I don't know. Tim gave a demonstration of this at Y2K in October, and one of our German visitors, he got up for the first time and tried it. Now he's a musician, he's pretty savvy, he's electronic savvy, synthesizer savvy, and he got right on it and started making music, and I could just tell, you know, the look in his eyes, just like the look in your eyes when you were playing it, was just like, this is too much fun. And you know, you would think that, well, a musician like myself, who's dedicated a lot of years to studying the craft and getting the technique and everything, would possibly be threatened by this, but not at all. I was just fascinated by it.
Yeah,
That's
it's
such an amazing
thing.
thing. You know?
Yeah. So do you plan on making more?
Yeah, one of the reasons I can make more easily is that the tech shop in San Jose has a CNC machine that can carve wood in any shape and holes. So this is an example of using the CNC machine to carve something. So I can, and the software adapts to any shape and any number of holes. So I continue to experiment with different layouts to see.
I'm hoping he builds one in my likeness.
You could create new designs too.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, it doesn't have to be just 4 and it's all different
Yeah, any
kinds.
number.
Wow. You could create a company that creates like Lego units where you could put all different ones together.
That was actually one of the first one I put together. I went to Michael's and got those stretcher bars that you make frames out of, and that's what I made the whole thing out of. They were very modular. not as pretty as this one. But
Yeah, no, that's pretty. So anyway, well, thank you for bringing all this equipment to the show. And you mentioned that you were going to be playing soon?
Not until NAMM show. I'll be playing down at NAMM.
You are?
Yeah,
I'll be there.
It should be. Yeah, it should be.
And where will you be playing?
At the Luperlative booth.
Okay,
And-
Luperlative.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll go
yeah,
look for you.
Playing for him and
Luperlative. We'll
yeah.
remember that. There are enough musicians in Santa Cruz going to NAMM. They'll
Yeah.
look for
I
you.
might be slumming over at the Moog booth too. I don't know.
Okay.
Hopefully.
Okay.
We'll see how that goes. And then after that, the band I was telling you about, the IPOs, last week in January will be our debut gig. We've been working on this band for about 8 months now, so we're gonna.
Okay, great. And Tim, how about you? Do you have anything planned?
I've actually been trying to cut down on the number of things I do to make time to write more software. I might do something for New Year's Eve in San Francisco.
Okay.
But I'm trying to work on software that takes a full body outline and does something
Great.
graphical with that.
Okay, well, when that happens, you'll have to come back again. Tim's now my number one person.
I know,
This
you're
is
the
your third
all-star
time.
here. Yeah. Well, he's
Come to
creating
Burning
some
Man.
amazing things. You
Yeah.
know, all the visual graphic stuff that the Loopy Cam and all that stuff. That was just you weren't really using it. You weren't the one behind the controls this year.
Yeah, that was
but
great this year. I mean, Maha
Oh, yeah.
Tatiano,
Maha Tatiana was the one who was manning at the Y2K this year, and it was just phenomenal. You know, it enhances the experience. It really does. You know, it's like. And it's not like your mother's light show either. It's a
Right.
completely new set of parameters. It's not just
Well, I've always
oil underlay.
well, oil was good.
Oil
right?
was good,
And so
yeah.
was the old analog synthesizers.
Yeah,
but,
certainly.
That basically the whole idea of it's kind of both of you are kind of in that key corner of synesthesia experience where the brain kind of goes into a different place because you're combining visuals and audio and taking your brain to different levels.
Yeah.
a lot of
that.
DJ collaborations are often, they aren't very related to each other. You've got a VJ showing some loops that they've done previously, and then you've got a DJ doing stuff. They happen to be playing simultaneously, but they're not really related. The Loopy Cam and other kinds of things create a much more synergistic combination where the visuals and the music actually are correlated and tied together.
Right.
And that's what we try to do.
What if you do just another minute
Yeah, let's
between
do
the
a
two
little
of you?
minute.
Sure. Do more of a rocking, I mean a harder edge.
Whatever you want.
So thank you to my guests, Bill and Tim, and thank you to our crew, Ron Powell, our director, Matilda Rand on camera, Dave Gibson, Susan Dyer, Karen Scott on character generator, and Paul Logan on audio. And thank you to all of CTV, including Marianne Thyken and also Craig Goldstein.
Bill, why did you bother to even show up?